Today I have with me Bekah Furches that I've already interviewed Bekah once, but we're doing another interview about a different topic dealing with grief. So today we're talking about the fact that she read the book A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, and that the impact it made on her, how raw, how it told what he was truly going through in grief, and how that affected her. And our theme today that we're talking about is really telling your story, and how that God uses your story to help someone. One of the things I think about as we start into this conversation is the fact that all throughout Scripture, it's basically God telling everyone's, that he chooses to throughout history, stories to teach us things.
With all the gory details.
Yes, every detail, even the hard details, even the difficult situations, the good decisions, the bad decisions, all the things, how we process. So today, that's what we're going to start into, is how this book affected you, and tell us about the book, and we'll just go from there.
All right, sounds good. So to start out, just on that topic and theme, I don't think I really thought about I need to share my story, going into this journey. And I'm a person who, I don't really like drama, and I don't like coming off dramatic. Sometimes girls, we just can't help it. But and I care way too much about what people think. So I'm always, I don't know, those things are always filters that I look at things through and overthink things. And anyway, you know how that is.
I'm a fellow overthinker.
Yes,
in fact, there's a sign,
superpower.
There's a sign on my desk that my sister bought me that said, "Wait, let me overthink this." And
yes, totally.
I see it daily.
Right. After we're done with this, I will come back to you and be like, "Wait, did that sound a certain way?" But anyway, so I think my goal for starting to share my story on Facebook was just, I had so many people wanting to know how I was doing, and you get so many texts, and it was wonderful. But it was like, let me just share how I'm doing and give an update, and then I won't have to text everyone separately.
Makes sense.
And so that's kind of where it started, and I got such a big response, like feedback, and people were saying it really helped them, and they appreciated how open it was. And so I just kept sharing, and sharing my story. And I've had a hard time, and I still struggle with this even today, doing this interview and knowing what to share. And I don't want my experience to make anyone else grieving feel like they're supposed to do it like me.
Sure.
I've read a lot of things on grief. People gave me a lot of books on grief. This one we're going to talk about today was really helpful. I have a pile that I haven't even touched because you just can't read them all. And sometimes you don't just always want to read about grief for...
Exactly.
But I was feeling like the way I was experiencing this was very different from what other people were. And I think we might have talked about this on the other one.
Okay, yes. Well, maybe a little, but I want to interject here. If you haven't seen the first video, Bekah's husband passed away. And how old was he when he passed away?
Just before his 51st birthday.
Yes, so very young. And you're still even younger than that. We won't get into your age, but...
I'm still in my 40s, I'll just say that.
Yes. And so the loss of her husband is what we're talking about when we're talking about your grief. So, okay. So you were concerned that how you experienced grief was unusual or different, or not quite what other people were saying.
That was a good example right there. The widow brain fog.
Grief
your
brain,
just
exactly.
Shuts off.
Can't think.
So I don't want people to feel like I'm doing it right and they're doing it wrong. It was different. And I kept reading all these examples or people sharing their story about like just way more emotional than I was feeling, or like I haven't been able to get out of bed for 2 weeks, and I just didn't. I had days where I didn't feel like getting up, or you feel very unmotivated or sluggish. But I don't know. Mine felt different, and so people, as I shared on Facebook, have said, "Are you going to write a book?" And I'm like, there's so many books out there. What? So anyway, as I just
and you think your story's not that important, or it won't help.
It'll just be white noise. Like I have piles of books on grief. I don't need to add one to everyone other widow's pile. So I've wrestled with that and struggled with that, and different people have spoken into that, into my heart, and I am changing my perspective on sharing my story, and that we all experience this in a unique way to us, and that our story is important because if I don't share it, and there's someone else out there not sharing theirs because
Mm-hmm.
of the same reason I'm not sharing mine. Like, we could connect over that.
Exactly.
But I have to share it. And my brother even said, there's probably a group of people experiencing the grief in a less emotional way like you, but nobody wants to say it because it makes them sound like they're callous or whatever.
And your brother's a counselor?
He's a family therapist.
Family therapist. So, I mean,
yeah, so he
he's
was
saying that
encouraging
from knowledge, a knowledgeable point.
Right, to share my story. And so this is, even just the sharing of my story has been a journey or whatever in this process. So all that as kind of backstory. So I had a friend send me the book, Grief Observed, by C.S. Lewis. And it's a very short book. It doesn't take that long to read. And it was actually his own personal journey. His wife died of cancer. I think it was cancer. And he never meant for it to be published.
Okay.
This is his personal journal. And so we talked about being careful what you write down.
Yes.
Your kids might
Yes, might find it later.
Yeah. No, but it was his own personal journal about the raw everything he wrestled with. He just was putting it. He was a writer. He's a very good writer. Okay. And so he was expressing what he was feeling. And so it's really not a book about comfort. That's not what it is. It's not a book written from a place of healing where he looked back and showed you how he was healed. Like, he was writing it as he was experiencing it in real time.
Okay.
And so it's in the thick of the rawness of grief and just what you're wrestling with. And so I read it once and just read it, but then I went back and read it again and highlighted and journaled, kind of journaled my way through it of what I related to and what parts of it I was just like, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling or how I'm thinking. And as I've thought about it, I was even talking to my sister about it, and she had mentioned that it's important to find someone whose story helps you understand yours better.
Oh, that's
and
good.
I thought that was really powerful.
That is powerful.
And that's what this book did for me, because when you're in grief, this is the first time I've ever gone through something like this. Like, I've had family members pass away, and some of it has been really hard, but nothing like losing a spouse. So it's all first time experiencing it. And so there's a lot of things that, like, you experience and don't even realize it's part of grief. There's things you don't even know you're experiencing it until someone puts it into words.
Right.
And you say, oh man, yeah, that's happening to me too. And so there's a comfort in the relatability of someone else. And I've read a lot of things on grief that have been very impactful for me, and some other time maybe we can talk about those. But this specific book was helpful to me, and I would encourage, if you know someone fresh in grief, to buy them a copy, because I think it's helpful no matter where you are on your grief journey, but it was specifically impactful to me while I was also in the raw thick of it, to be able to read what he was experiencing and not feel like a crazy person.
Yes.
Or like afraid to talk about it because feeling unchristian because I'm wrestling with my faith. Or just, there's a lot of stuff he goes through. And just know that when you read the book, he's not going to put a bow on it for you and make it all better, because he was still in the process of healing when he wrote this book.
So it's more like validating your feelings and because you do, they talk about you're alone in your grief. You are, because no one is grieving the person that passed away quite like you are, because you're the one who had that relationship with that person. But I do think that it's important that we understand that there are similarities in how we process it, or there are similarities in what we're feeling, or even afraid to say out loud. So James said last night in his sermon how that we grieve alone, but we heal corporately. It's a village that comes alongside of us, and things that God uses to help us be on a healing journey. I'm not saying you're ever completely healed, but that pathway to where you can start to live your life again, and realize God has a purpose left for you.
Right. Yeah, I wrote that down too. Your pain is personal, but your healing is corporate. And when you're a believer and you have a circle in your church, that's been vital in my healing process. And I'm blessed to have a very strong village, and my family, my siblings, my parents, and then extended family from that. And then I have, my church community in several churches that I've been in. It's just, I have a very strong support system, and I know not everyone has that.
True.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but you're not meant to heal alone, and in isolation is not the way to heal. Like, we're supposed to do that in community, and it provides wisdom from other people,
Right.
and it gives other people a chance to share their story with us, even if it's not the same. He talked about that too. You don't have to find someone walking the exact same trauma that you're
Right.
walking,
Right.
but we all are looking for healing, and we've all learned things along the way, and the lessons we've learned
Yes.
can help each other regardless of the specific situation
Sure.
that we're walking through. And so that's another important aspect of sharing your story. And it's a good thing that I was reminded of, that not to get so in my head about, but what if my story doesn't, whatever, like, it's not about that. It's about me connecting with someone over the commonality of just grief or hard
Sure.
things or suffering, or you might be fighting cancer and
Yes.
I'm grieving, but we can still encourage each other and comfort. The Bible says we comfort with the comfort that we've been given.
Exactly.
And so when we've experienced comfort, we can provide that for someone else, and we're supposed to come alongside and bear one another's burdens. That was also mentioned.
Yes.
A little unashamed plug for Landmark Baptist.
The YouTube video
Pastor
from last
James.
night.
Yes, it was really good yesterday. So I started on this journey of sharing my story, and I was just going to share some quotes with you from the book.
Yes.
And how I connected with it.
Okay.
In specific, the post you mentioned, I had shared a review that someone did on the book, and they kind of took, like, I forget, 5 or 6 points of what the book was about. And it was just such a good book review. That's what brought it up again in my mind.
Okay.
And I even have a friend just the last 24 hours who said, I have a friend who passed away, whose husband passed away. How can I help? I'm like, send him this book.
Oh.
Because it's just a good, relatable way. And it's very good in the fresh, raw parts of grief.
Which not a lot of it is. I mean, I've even thought about the YouTube videos that we do. It's not, I don't know that there's a perfect place to watch them, but I don't know that, like, for some people, I think it'd be too soon to watch some of them.
Yeah. Yep.
And then others, it's maybe too far removed, or I don't know. So I think it's important to have something that you feel is helpful right away.
Right. That's true. Because the grief is in stages, I guess, as they say. But in each one, you're in a different place. Like,
Right.
Like the first 3 months has a very specific thing about it.
Yes.
And then 6 months out. And then I'm
Yes.
coming up on, I think, 18 months out. So you're in a different place each time.
Right.
And so I probably will read it again.
Yes.
And just see, like, oh, okay, that is in my past. Like, I don't deal with that anymore. And maybe it'll bring hope.
Well,
or
and I'm
feel
over
like
5 years out and planning on reading the book just
Yeah.
that's how I felt, or I still do, or
Right, yeah. So the one thing, the person who reviewed the book, and it didn't list a person's name, so I don't know who it was, but she said, or he, when I read it, I felt like someone else had sat on the floor in a quiet room, surrounded by silence, trying to understand how the world keeps moving even when your person is gone.
oh,
And so it's reading the book was like sitting next to someone who's been there
Yes.
and done that, and can, like, sit alongside you and just commiserate.
yes,
And they're, even though that's not comforting you, it is comforting you, because you feel seen.
because at the very beginning of grief, so many people say, I just feel like it was surreal to watch the whole world go on, and I'm stuck right here, like my world is shattered.
It just stopped.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, well, they're doing their normal thing today, or they have to go, and yes,
Right. And that's how life has to happen.
yes,
It has
exactly.
to be
You
that
know
way.
it has to, but it's awful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he does talk about that too. And so one of the quotes from the book, and we'll just go through them
Yes.
and talk through them. No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing.
Mm,
And
so true.
the first thing I thought about when I read that, like maybe 2 months after my husband passed, my sister came and stayed with me for a week and was helping me, like, go through clothes and just be together. And I kept saying to her, as we were just hanging out and walking and doing, I would get like,
deep
and
breaths.
she would look at me, and I'm like, I don't know why I keep sighing. I just keep sighing all the time. And
Yeah.
it was almost like brain had to keep telling my body, like, you need more oxygen. You're not breathing good. Like, take deeper breaths. And I felt like I don't know how, it doesn't make logical sense, but that I just wasn't breathing the same. I was breathing shallow.
It does make sense. Yeah.
And like you would realize, like, I'm not breathing right. And whew.
Almost afraid.
When you do that and you're with someone, they're like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know why. I just keep sighing all the time." So when I read that, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yes.
I'm doing that too. And I described the physical feeling as like this pit in my stomach, and it would just get bigger or smaller. Sometimes I didn't notice it as much. Sometimes it was so big, like I couldn't think about anything else. But that sense of fear, it is kind of that, like, adrenaline, something bad is around the corner. It is a very similar feeling.
Yes.
And if you haven't experienced it, that's just a good way to describe it. It feels like, kind of like when you're afraid something's about to happen, or you're afraid to walk around the corner. That's that, you just walk around with that feeling all the time as this kind of pit in your stomach. And so that was relatable to me. And I found I used the phrase a lot as I was sharing, that something takes my breath away.
Okay.
Actually, today, the memory of a year ago, my son moved out a year ago today, and I was facing empty nest without my husband, and we had been so excited about that. And I said, like, the thought of not having that takes my breath away. Well, that phrase also is used in a positive way.
Sure.
Like, oh, you take my breath away.
Right.
And one time I was sitting and thinking, like, how to describe that more specifically. And I just kind of sat with it for a few minutes, and I was like, if you take a deep breath, I'll have to say it first and then do it, because I can't do it when I'm breathing. But if you take a deep breath and then exhale all the way, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, almost like you're starting to drown, and sit for a half a second in that feeling right before you gasp. That feeling
That's the feeling.
is when I say it takes my breath away. Like when something happens and it gut punches you, or it literally takes the breath out of my lungs. It's that feeling right there where you breathe out.
And then you need a second.
And then, that feeling right before you inhale is like, that's how it feels. And it's like my brain is like, breathe, breathe, breathe. You're about to pass out. Like, breathe.
Just get through this moment, which is literally what you do in the beginning of grief. You just get through the moment.
Right.
And that's so funny because funny is not the right word. That's so relatable. One of the ways I described my grief was you feel like you're drowning. And you finally swim your way up and put your face out of the water, and you gasp for air, and then it's like the water comes crashing again and takes you under. And so it's this fight to just get a deep breath. And you're right. So there's days it's like you have to remind yourself, just take a deep breath.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy as well, because then you have times when, like, the water gets a little quiet and you can tread for a little bit.
Yes.
But then
bam, it just smacks you down, and you're not expecting it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that too. Another quote, he said, at other times it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's just also uninteresting. Yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty, but if they could just talk to one another and not to me. So it's like the difficulty of engaging with people. You don't really want to be alone, because that also is hard. But then when you're with people, you don't want to have to be on.
Right.
And you don't want to keep talking about how you're feeling. I don't know. It's this.
It's almost like you're in a bubble in the room watching everything go on and everybody function, I think.
Right.
At times.
And that concussed feeling, or which I thought was a great word.
It is.
Or the invisible blanket. It's just, they say the fog or whatever, and it's just hard to see anything, think of anything, process anything. I found myself, my husband was a pastor, and I lived in the parsonage, and I was the church secretary, and so I was still very plugged in at church immediately after he passed, and stayed there for almost the rest of that year. And I would be tempted to come to church late and leave early so that I could.
Don't have to talk to people.
and there were, I'm not gonna lie, there were a couple Sundays that I did do that, and I could feel like at the end of the song, I was feeling emotional. I was feeling I just can't do people right now. And so during the prayer I would leave, because I didn't want to tell 10 people how I was doing. It just,
Right.
but most of the time, God was able to help me fight through that and push through it. And it usually was a blessing to me. It usually wasn't like I had to suffer through talking to people. They loved on me, and it did comfort me and it did encourage me. But I just really connected with that feeling of wanting people but not wanting people, like wanting people around but not wanting to interact. I even thought about, I got so many cards from people, which was wonderful. But I found myself right away as I'm like, okay, I need to read the cards because that's what I'm supposed to do when someone sends me a card. And they all sounded the same. And it was like that Charlie Brown teacher, like, wah, 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 wah. And I'm like, I just felt like a jerk. I'm like, this is terrible. I'm not even like absorbing what people are saying.
Right.
So I honestly just put a lot of them away. And then I think it was maybe 6 or 8 weeks before I pulled them back out again. And then was able to read them. I did the same thing.
Read them later. And then it's like, oh, I didn't even remember that I got a card from this person.
Right.
I certainly didn't remember what they said.
Right.
And I don't think that's any fault of anyone grieving. You just cannot, your brain cannot take in more. Right. It's so consumed with dealing with the grief. And I'll back to your point about like going to church late and leaving early. I don't think it's healthy to do it all the time, but I also think that people grieving need to understand that might be how you do it. Like better than never getting out is just going. And if you have to go in late and leave early, you know, or go to an event and only stay for an hour versus 3 hours if the event's 3 hours long or whatever, it might be your way to just gradually get back into things.
That's true.
And it's fine in the rawness of your grief to do some of that. I think that's a good point. Like that, it's a valid thing that you feel that way because it's like your body and your brain and your emotions just cannot handle any more than you're already processing.
Yeah, that is a good point. Another one was, for in grief, nothing stays put. One keeps on emerging from a phase, but it always recurs round and round. Everything repeats. Am I going in circles, or dare I hope I am on a spiral? But if a spiral, am I going up or down? How often will it be for always? How often will the vast emptiness astonish me like a complete novelty and make me say, I never realized my loss till this moment? The same leg is cut off time after time. And that was something that really frustrated me in grief. It was the, like, realizing it over and over again. Something hits you, there's some kind of gut punch or whatever, and it was like brand new again. And that just was super annoying, to be honest. I found that annoying.
It's like, I already processed this part.
Yes, I don't want to keep circling back to this intense of a feeling. And I think it was my daughter had mentioned that to me at one point too. Like, how long until that goes away? I'm like, I don't know, honey. I'm like, we're on the same point in this journey, and I still feel that sometimes. I will say, as I come up on like a year and a half, they definitely space further apart. And people always say, you know, you don't get over grief. You don't even really get through grief. You just get better at carrying it. And I think I mentioned in the last interview we did that I didn't like that advice because you want it to be something you can get past. And then but it is true. It feels like you're getting past it in the sense that you're getting better at carrying it. Just like when you exercise, you know, 20 pounds feels like a lot until that muscle is really strong, and then 20 pounds feels like nothing. Right. So you do get better at just holding on to it and carrying it, but it doesn't go away. Your son said last night, it changes the fabric of who you are. Right.
When you're forever
like that happens to you. Right. You're never going to go back to the person you were before.
Do you remember on that vein, that feeling of, especially in the first few weeks or months, where you would get a good night's sleep or be sound asleep and wake up, and for a moment you forgot what was happening, and then it's like, oh, I've lost my person. And you relive that, you relive that moment over and over and over. I felt like, I remember, especially in those first few weeks, you wake up and for a moment you look around your room and things seem normal, and then that comes crashing in. Like he said, that's such a good thing to say. It's like having your leg amputated over and over and over. It's like, oh no, things aren't okay. Oh yes, he really did die. You know. Yeah,
he's still gone. Yeah, he says her absence is like the sky spread over everything, and I think that's why it feels like that, because you can't walk away from it. You can't get away from it. It is spread over everything. And that's probably, I don't know all the science of it, but that's probably why it's so physically exhausting.
Yes.
Because your emotions are just constantly processing. And sometimes you just want to turn your brain off. Like, I don't want to have to process through every single moment with grief. But it's a blanket over everything, like the sky. You can't
That's mine, Anna. If you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe. If you are listening on the podcast, please like and follow. We would love for you to do that now to help our channel grow and become a blessing to others.
I prepared for this and thought about some of the different quotes, and he said that about the absence being like the sky spread over everything. I had remembered that I journaled a day in the life of grief. And I just was thinking, I'm going to write down every moment that grief pops up in my day.
Okay.
And just to, I don't know, for journaling's sake, there is healing in just getting the words out. And so sometimes it happened that morning, sometimes when I wake up, right before I wake up, I'm in the moment again when I found him.
Okay.
Over the coffee table. Like I wake up to that picture.
Wow.
Like it just happened.
Yes.
And then I'm like, my heart's racing, and then I have to start, praying through, like, wow, why did I wake up with that? Like, why does that happen? I don't even know what I was dreaming, but it's in the morning. It's not like I had a nightmare about it in the middle of the night. Anyway, I just wake up to that picture of his body where it was. And so then I have to pray through and ask God to help me and push that picture out of my mind and help me to refocus and get through. And then, I'm going through these as they hit me during that day. So then when I stand up out of bed, I have a picture on the wall of us when we went to the Bahamas in that trip. And it's one of my favorite pictures that a friend gave to me. And in that moment, that picture brings a smile to my face, and remember, that was such a fun trip. I'm so glad we did that. There was no sadness in that one, sometimes. And then that morning, I put worship music on. I was getting a shower. I was feeling good. I was feeling hopeful. I was feeling motivated. I was like, okay, this is going to be a good day. We moved past that wake-up moment. And then when I go to get ready, I open my drawer to get some underwear for the day. Sorry if this is too personal, but he used to buy me, keep me stocked on new underwear. And I had this certain brand that I liked from a certain store, and he would just, every Christmas, would get a whole bunch of them. And it just in that moment, as you're getting underwear out of the drawer to get dressed for the day, it's the gut, that pit, that whatever feeling that we described earlier. It's like, oh, I guess I have to be in charge of buying my own underwear now. Something I'm very capable of doing, but it's just that reminder. So then I went about my day, and I was having, days aren't good or bad because of the grief moments. The grief moments are there in the good days and the bad days. They're in the days. Your day is it's good for this hour, but then it was bad for 20 minutes, and then it was good for a couple hours, and then,
Yes.
And so I went about my day, enjoyed time with my parents. We were just chilling. I was relaxing, which in this season right now, which is supposed to be a season of rest, I have to fight feeling guilty about resting because my body likes to be productive, my brain, and I feel like I should be, So then it was everything, my brain, I just want to shut it off. It's just a wrestling. Now I'm telling myself, you're going to ruin this season of rest if you stress about the fact that you're resting. Kind of defeats the whole purpose of rest. So be thankful for the rest. Sit in it and rest in it. And it's just more like going through mental things. But then I went through some, an afternoon of I wasn't sad at all. I didn't even think about Zach. I just was living life and enjoying, relaxing, being with my parents. And then we were watching a Hallmark movie. And I don't watch a lot of those right in this season for obvious reasons. And this one was fine. And there was a character in the movie, the female character had to confront a guy from her past that had hurt her or something, I don't remember. And, in Hallmark, there's always two guys and a girl.
Oh, yes.
There's the guy from before and the guy from now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so she was confronting him, and off in the background, you see the guy who currently likes her and is pursuing her. But he's just standing there watching to make sure she's good. And in that moment, this is why I don't watch Hallmark movies or those kind of movies, just this wave of deep sadness. Like I used to have that. I had a guy that always had my back and watched out for me and made sure I was good. And I don't have that anymore. And then it hits you again, and you're just working through it, and you're controlling emotions. And breathe, take a deep breath. It's going to be fine. Just that moment by moment. And then later that evening, I think I might have been door dashing, and I was at a grocery store and looking for whatever I was supposed to be getting for this person's order. And a husband walked by his wife, and just as he walked behind her, touched her back with his hand. And I noticed those details because they mattered to me when I was married. And I used to tease him that he knew he was not allowed to walk by me without touching me in some way, because I said, it feels like when you're not speaking to me, like, why'd you just walk by me without touching me? And he's like, girls are so weird. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. So he always would, whenever he walked, even just to reach in the kitchen to get a spoon, he would touch my back and whatever. So again, it's, then the tears come when you're in the grocery store. You're trying to just walk away and remember why you were there and finish the shopping and get yourself together. And I was door dashing because that was the next thing on my GPS told me, get on Kirkwood Highway, which is just a highway where we live. But I live now where I used to live when we were first married. And that's a road we used to travel a lot. I didn't have a specific memory attached to Kirkwood Highway, just Kirkwood Highway was a road we drove a lot. And because there's no logic to it, when the GPS said the words Kirkwood Highway, this feeling went through my whole body, like a physical, not an emotion, a physical reaction, like a restless leg, shudder, shiver.
Oh, wow.
Like went through my whole body. And I was like, what in the world was that? Like, that's so weird that my brain and it wasn't even tied to a specific memory, like even
this was us. We drove here. We were here a lot.
But your body does hold on to the trauma somehow, physically. Again, I'm not a scientist, but it does hold on to that trauma, and it just in that moment. And so then I'm like, grief is so weird. And then I'm driving, and you finish, and then I might have mentioned this in the last one. I saw a Wisconsin license plate. Yeah, we did talk about this, and that made me think of Zach because he wanted to retire to Wisconsin.
Yes,
and start a Christmas tree farm. He always wanted to live in Wisconsin, and it was like it hit me in that moment. Oh yeah, that's not going to be part of my future because that won't be something that we do together. And then I think this
if you ever own a Christmas tree farm, when you're older and retired, I'm going to remind you of this.
Okay, that it was definitely. I feel like this was a different night, but I have on here too that I went with my cousin to a bingo night. We both got made fun of because she's younger than me, and they say bingo's for old people. But let me tell you, there were at least half the people there were younger than me.
Oh, really?
And it was a blast. But I was thinking, like, in a joyful way, like, he would never do this with me. And I was having fun going somewhere I would have never gone with him because he wouldn't have done that because bingo's for old people. And so my cousin and I went and we had a blast. But then there was a guy there, was like the athletic director. And I had always thought he'd be so good at that job at a school. And he was doing like the MC of it. And he was fine. This is not an insult on him. But I kept thinking, oh, Zach would be so good at this. Mm-hmm. And way funnier. He was super funny. He'd be way funnier. But that was that day. And it was just kind of gives you an example of when people are grieving. And I'm sure you can write your own list. Even 5 years in, you probably still have things that come up of just how that, like the sky, it's a blanket. That's just your whole day.
That's such a good thing that you did that because it does help people. And like you said, even realize why you're exhausted because I'm up, down, up, down, up, down. Mm-hmm. And it's not the clean cut stages everybody says. It's literally a roller coaster every day, all day long. Mm-hmm. And other days are worse than others. And I think that's amazing, the insight to just say, look, in one day, this is all the time that my mind goes back to something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when people ask you, how are you? It depends on which moment of that day you ask me that. Because if you ask me at first thing in the morning, like I'm sick to my stomach right now, or if you ask me in the afternoon when I was relaxed, you know what I mean? It's just, it's so different all throughout the day. And so when you're someone comforting a grieving friend or family member, just remember, maybe don't ask them how they're doing, or ask them what was something that what was something hard today? What was a hard
Oh,
moment
that's
today?
a good one.
Or what was, did you have a good memory of
Yes.
your loved one today? Or instead of always, because you get tired of answering how you're doing, and you never even really know the answer to that question. Not that it's a bad question, in the sense of, now I'm backtracking on what I just said.
No, I do that.
Yeah.
I tend to walk up to people in church that I know are grieving, and it's just so automatic to say,
Mm-hmm.
"How are you?" And I will even catch myself and say, "Never mind. I know roughly how you are, so
Right.
don't try to answer that question."
Right.
And then I'll come up with, "You're right." I mean, I do consciously try to think of, well, what is something else I could say to them?
Right. I said to a friend the other day, and it wasn't grief, it was something else they were going through, but the concept is the same. I said, "Are you feeling more up or more down today?"
Oh, that's good. That's
and it
really
was
good.
like, gives them, it's just,
I can be honest. Like,
Right.
Today's a bad day.
yeah, I'm more down than up. It's
Yes.
like, oh, how can I pray for you, or
Yes.
whatever. But in the moment, I don't want people to feel like they're so afraid they're going to say the wrong thing that they don't
True.
say anything.
True. Say something.
Reach out to your friend. Just give them a
Mm-hmm.
hug. Maybe don't say anything. Just give them a hug. But I also want to have the grace as a griever to not expect everyone to know exactly what to say. 'Cause
Sure.
I don't either when I'm talking.
And
to
I have to
different
say, so many people are so offended at what people say to them while they're grieving. And I get that. It
Mhm.
depends on your personality. But I remember early on making up my mind. I am not going to be that person who analyzes everything they say to me, because they don't know what to say. And if you see it for what it is, they are trying.
Right.
They are trying to
trying to
reach out
connect
to
with
you,
you. Mhm.
trying to connect with you. Maybe there's things we could say that give people help. But yeah, I agree. There was a point I was just like, I am not going to be offended if they say the wrong
yeah.
thing, or what people say is the wrong thing. I'm just thankful they tried.
The same. I feel like everyone that's lost someone has had someone talk to them about their animal dying, their pet dying. And
Yes.
that's like a common thing that
Yes.
people who grieve make fun of people who say, and that's so ridiculous. But again, it's like, it's not a comparison. This is not a contest.
Right.
Losing a pet is also painful.
Yes.
We're not trying to make it level or even, or we're not keeping score. And again, they're just trying to connect
trying to
with
relate.
you emotionally on a hard thing.
Right.
And I know how many times in a moment of like, what do I say, that I've probably said the wrong thing. So
Sure.
yeah, I feel the same way. The last one I'll share, and at this point I would just encourage everybody to read the book. But this one kind of made me laugh, but there was two parts to it. It doesn't really matter whether you grip the arms of the dentist's chair or let your hands lie in your lap. The drill drills on.
Ooh.
And it was like, oh, that's true. Like you can white knuckle this ride of grief, or you can let your hands rest in your lap.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everybody's journey probably includes a little bit of both.
Sure.
Because there are just some days when you're just trying to hold on. But the point is good that this journey is moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
whether you white knuckle it or rest. And for me, that was something that God was helping me learn, and through another book about resting in His sovereignty, that if I believe He's in control, how then should that affect the way I travel through this road? Because, and we talked about this last night, when something like this happens, it shakes your very core.
Sure.
It causes you to look back at your foundation
Mm-hmm.
and question
Yes.
if it's really strong or real or whatever. And, as a person of faith, and faith specifically in Christ, there's all these truths that we've always believed, but something like this causes you to look back and say, what do I actually believe this? And
Exactly.
so God is in control. Yes, I believe that. God is good. Yes, I also believe that. And then when something feels like it's out of control and there's nothing good about it, wait a minute. Wait, do I actually? Those two things don't even go together. And that's what we talked about on the last episode of you have to come back to truth, because the truth of God's word is a firm foundation. It is. It's an anchor for our soul, and life is going to constantly pull the rug out from under us. And if not that, what am I going to go back to if I can't come back to the foundation of God's word? I don't know how people without faith in Christ get through hard things like this.
True.
I just don't. I don't know. I get so much comfort from it, and so much stability when everything just feels so out of control to be able to bring myself back to the truth of God. And even in sharing our story, and why that's important, I know that there are actually people who wouldn't recommend this book because of its rawness, because I didn't talk about this part, but he does really wrestle through his faith, which that wasn't something I related to him on, which is okay. That just wasn't something I went through so far in my journey. Questioning if God was even real,
Right.
or like I wrestled for sure, and I still wrestle through different things, but his specific questions weren't the same ones I went through. But I think sometimes as believers, we're afraid to wrestle. And even when we counsel and give advice, we want to talk people out of wrestling and out of doubting, because there's a part of our brain that wants to say, if you're wrestling, then you don't have faith and you're not believing.
Right.
And maybe there is a part of that, but recently I was in a Bible study, and the passage in Genesis where Jacob wrestles with God,
Yes.
like God could have stopped that immediately. He's God, right? He was obviously physically able to stop the wrestling match with Jacob, but he didn't. He allowed it to go on. He allowed Jacob to wrestle with him. And to me, that was saying, like,
That's
there
good.
is value
That's good.
in the wrestling, and we have a very personal, relational God that we serve and that we worship, and he wants relationship with us. And if we're in a place of wrestling, he wants us to do that with him. He wants us, whatever we're feeling, he wants us to bring it to him. So if I'm wrestling with your goodness, instead of, the healthy thing is to go to him about it.
Sure.
Don't turn from him and shake your fists and, no, God, I don't feel like you're good. I'm starting to question this. He knows what you're thinking anyway. So
exactly. Good
you
point.
might as well just talk to him about it. And he's big enough to handle our big questions. And so this book, I feel like C.S. Lewis, he was wrestling. He was wrestling through, and he was sharing that story, his story of his wrestling. Again, he was writing it down for his own personal.
Sure, his journal.
Not for all of us, but we do have the benefit of being able to read it. And that's been, I don't know if convicting is the right word, but it has definitely influenced me to stop being afraid, to share exactly what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. Turn off all the thoughts of like, well, what if so-and-so thinks I'm weak? Or what if this other widow thinks I think I'm better than her because I don't cry every day? Or what if this is my story?
Just leave that.
God is the author of my story. And that was my prayer even this morning before we did this was, okay, God, you have the pen. You're writing this story. Help me just to be faithful to share it in a way that brings you glory, but that also people can relate to. Because
it will help others. Right.
And I don't want to be so over spiritual that people are like, oh, she's in a different category than me. I don't want to come off like that. But when you share the rawness of your story, that's when people are like, okay, that's what I connect with. When I read his book, it was in the moments of the things he was sharing that I really connected with him.
Yes.
And as believers, this book is not the one that brings you back around to healing, because it was his raw journey, but there's a lot of other really good ones out there that do that for you, that connect with you in the journey, but then circle you back to truth. And those, I have a list of those too that were really impactful. One that I'll just say, just for the sake of people who need the healing, is A Grace Revealed by Jerry Sitzer.
Okay.
That book was one where it was also very raw, and his trauma that he went through was intense, but he also shares his healing, and he republished it 30 years later and shares even that far out what he also learned in the journey. So books that give you the full circle, that's a good one for that. But the C.S. Lewis book, coming back to that, is his story, and the rawness of his story it made me feel like I was seen in what I was going through, because he was so specific about it. And it has encouraged me to be more free with my story.
Yes.
Your podcast is the perfect avenue for doing
that's
that.
what it's for. As you know, once I shared things I've gone through, thinking, because that is very much what I felt like was the rawness of grief is so hard, and if you're not or I feel like some people, maybe because it's so deep and so hard, they can't share what they're going through at all or put it into words. Like you said, sometimes it's helpful to read what someone else put into words and think, oh yeah, that's what I can't put into words. But I do think there's a stigma out there that if you are not just saying, well, God's with me and I'm going to get through today and I never question anything. And if you can say that, great. But many, many people are shaken to the core and they do have doubts. I have been a Christian since 12 years old, and in church, not just church, but Bible study, studying the Bible, teaching it, ministry, all the things for years. And were those moments that I just thought, is everything that I believe in real? Is there really even a God? Now, they were fleeting moments, and I was able to come back to Scripture or say, I know what the Lord's done in my life. I know, where he says in his word, you ask me this and I'll show you. But to deny that grief, because you, like you said, you're in your moment of thinking, oh, this is so horrible. How can this happen to me? How can God let this happen? And it takes some working through. And so I think that is the whole reason for the podcast. Is I just thought, I think people need to, as Christians, need to hear what the rawness of what you're going through, and then how you circle back to truth, instead of just, I'm going to say this verse about comfort to you, and so now you should be fine today. And we're not going to talk about how awful it really is. We're not going to admit how terrible this is. And like you said earlier, or like James said last night, you are forever changed. It will never be the same. And it is one of those things. It sounds so trite to say you don't know till you know, but you really don't. If you've never been through something like that, you don't quite know till you go through it. And you will. If you live long enough, you're going to experience terrible things. You're going to experience losing people and, hard things in life. And so you're going to go there. But that was the whole purpose that I ever started sharing my story, and it helped me so much to just say it out loud. And then people said, well, it has helped me. And so then I went to, okay, I want to hear what others have to say, because there is such a variety of the way that we process. I also love the fact that you're saying, some of the things people are saying they dealt with, I didn't. And so then I felt like, am I grieving right? Or am I even processing right? Or like you said, I was afraid to say it because I don't sound like the textbook grieving person. And as you've been told by, you said, some of your family members and so forth, saying, yeah, but when you share your story, there's going to be people out there that are doing the exact same thing you are doing. They are grieving, maybe not like what they're hearing the textbook grief is, and they're thinking, what's wrong with me? Am I doing this wrong? And you're also afraid if you admit, like, today I had a couple hours where I didn't cry, or I was able to get out of bed fine, or there's different personalities in the drive and what makes you go. But you're also afraid people are going to think, she didn't really love her person. She did, the way she's processing, she couldn't have loved that person that deeply. And yet you can, because everybody processes differently.
I honestly have had that thought myself.
Yes.
Because I'm not a crier. I'm just not a crier. That's not, and I cried plenty. Your son's sermon got me. I was wrecked yesterday in church, but that's not always it like builds up, and I'll go 6 weeks without crying, and then I'll cry, but even still for a minute or two, and then it's done. And I had the thought, like, I wonder if I didn't actually maybe I don't actually know how to love people. Right,
that goes through your mind, but it's really just a personality difference.
So dumb. I loved him more than anything.
Yes.
But it's just your brain plays tricks on you and tries to undermine your emotions and all of that. And like we said, we're really good.
And I think Satan is good at making you feel like, oh, your story doesn't matter, or somebody will take that wrong. When the reality is, God's word is story after story after story to help us. And he definitely doesn't leave out the rawness of any of it, as we've learned even in the things that we've been studying recently. So I'm so glad that you came on and did this with me today, because I think it's a whole other topic that we need to talk about. And it also circles back to reiterating the purpose of talking to people about their story and their grief, because their story matters, and someone out there will connect or be helped by even one. If it helps someone with even one thing you said, or validates their grief, or helps them realize, oh, it's okay that I thought this, but I don't want to stay there. You know?
Right. I definitely don't want to stay stuck. I don't want to finish before mentioning that James mentioned last night in his sermon, and my sister also reminded me of, as Christians, we have the example of Jesus.
Right.
And he wants us to come to him in our grief, which we mentioned, but also Hebrews tells us that he is someone who sympathizes with us in all points.
Yes.
And he never sinned in his grief, but we have the example of him on the cross, where all the things he went through in his humanness, and he's crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in that moment was feeling loss.
Yes.
And the Bible includes that. And it's an uncomfortable thing, just like we said with C.S. Lewis's book. Like, yeah, he shares some very raw wrestling. And yes, it's uncomfortable. What grief causes you to go through is uncomfortable.
Yes.
It's uncomfortable for you to talk about. It's uncomfortable for the person listening because they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to say. Wrestling is just uncomfortable, and we have to be okay with that. But knowing that Jesus is there for us, and that passage, I don't have it in front of me, but it says that he was tempted like we are without sin. He's experienced in all points what we've experienced. And the next verse says, so we can come boldly. He wants us to come boldly to him as the one who knows what we're going through. And he wants to connect with us in that loneliness, in that suffering, in a way that he can relate to it. He knows, like in the same way I could connect with C.S. Lewis and what he was experiencing, I can also connect with Jesus because he has been through it, and he wants me to come to him and allow him to help heal me in those deepest, darkest places of my grief.
That's perfect. Yes, he's the ultimate interceder, as the Bible says, because he's been there. He's been through everything that we have.
Yeah.
And that rejection from his father, that separation from someone that he loves so much. Yes, that's good. Well, thank you for coming on again today, and we'll hope and pray that, someone going through the same things or similar things is helped by this today.
All right.
Thanks.